Welcome, welcome. All right, I see folks trickling in. Hey, everyone. Hope all is well. Thank you so much for being here and for choosing to be part of this special event, Connection and Trust at Work, How It's Built and Why It Matters. My name is Asia Smith, she, her pronouns. I'm an executive leadership coach and community catalyst at ThinkHuman, and I'm tuning in from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Maryland more specifically. I know we have an international crowd with us today, so let's connect before we get started. So let us know in the chat what your name is, where you're dialing in from today. Just want to see who we've got in the room. Also interested to see if we've got any familiar names here for today. Okay, we got Shannon from Annapolis, Maryland, Sophia from Raleigh, North Carolina, Amy from San Diego. I see some more California coming up. I see Toronto, Athens, Georgia, Lebanon. Okay, New York City, Florida, the UK. Okay, nice. Welcome to everyone who just got a shout out. It's really great seeing everyone introducing themselves in the chat. Please continue to do so. And to everyone here sharing the space with us today, we're all really grateful to have you here. Please take from this conversation whatever it is that you see in your growth, and please don't let the growth stop there. We encourage connecting with a teammate, a friend, or a loved one, perhaps even a coach or a therapist, to talk through this topic so you can take care of yourself and feel empowered to continue the discussion in your community. Still seeing people introduce themselves in the chat. I see Mexico City. And so we'll get warmed up a bit more in the chat for today's discussion. Since we're talking about building connection and trust at work and why that matters, let us know. How do you define connection? How do you define trust? So what does connection and trust mean to you? Okay, so we're just waiting in the chat. What does connection and trust mean to you? Trust, knowing folks will stick to what they say. Okay. Psychological safety, having someone to confide in, meaningful relationships, being able to be yourself. Consistency, creating community, respect, connection. Okay, awesome. And so thank you so much for that input so far. It's so great to see folks interacting in the chat and throughout the discussion. If you feel energized to say something, please don't hesitate to share, comment, ask questions. This is great input so far, and your presence and contribution always make the conversation richer. You might spark a thought for someone in the room, or we all might learn something from what you have to say. And with all that being said, this webinar wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for our fantastic partners and the commitment and heartfelt work of our team and leadership at ThinkHuman to provide a safe and brave space for real conversations in the world like this one. So I'm thrilled to introduce ThinkHuman and our partners for today's webinar. First up, ThinkHuman is a leadership development organization that supports HR and L&D leaders with implementing community-centered and experiential-based leadership programs for leaders at all levels. And these are built to support a culture of belonging. The leadership training programs that we offer, in particular, our flagship programs, Leader Lab, Mini Lab, Grow Lab, and our recently launched L&D Builder, are designed to create mindset shifts and behavioral change over time that sticks with a heart-centered approach. Toward the end of the webinar, a poll will pop up so you can let us know if you're interested in hearing from ThinkHuman or our partners. In the meantime, I'm going to put my link in the chat now, and we'll also share it at the end. If anyone would like to connect with ThinkHuman about bringing us to your organization. And to introduce our partners, I'm going to start with 15Five. 15Five offers intuitive solutions to help managers to measure and support their team's performance. They're a complete performance management platform that combines coaching and manager training, 360 performance reviews, in-depth engagement surveys, robust goal and OKR tracking, coaching and manager employee feedback tools like one-on-ones and pulse ratings to create effective managers, highly engaged employees, and top performing organizations. To learn more about 15Five, visit 15five.com. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat. I see it's already in the chat too from some of our friends at 15.5. And last but not least, we have Collective. Collective is a DEI consulting agency that approaches DEI in a bolder, more human way. And it's committed to creating real sustainable change, whether it's building out an L&D strategy or getting a pulse on your culture. They believe in a few core tenets when it comes to our work, and that's honest partnership above all else. Human-centric is better than data-centric, and change stems from short-term tactical wins and true personal transformation. To learn more about Collective, visit www.hellocollective.com. And so I'll put this in the chat as well. And thanks again to our partners and to our amazing panel, who you'll all meet shortly, for helping us bring this event to life. Before we dive into the webinar, we'd also like to share an artistic moment as we clear our minds and settle in for today's discussion. Her gifts today, we have Desiree Jaha. Ancestral utterance, heartfelt journeys, and vocal mastery blend to form Desiree Jaha's sound. Built with care over a decade of singing, songwriting, and performing, a craftsman of song, she shares her voice as a frontwoman, composer, and producer of live, recorded, and digital experiences. Honed in on the rigor of jazz and sacred practice of soul, Desiree roots in song as a vehicle to connect and build. To learn more, visit desireejaha.com, and I will put this link in the chat as well. And so without further ado, Desiree, feel free to come onto camera with your audio on and do your thing.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone see me? Beautiful. Okay, I'm seeing some good people in the chat. Hi. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm very
Desiree,
happy.
we can't hear you. Just letting you know.
I'm seeing some good people. Can you hear me in the chat now?
I think we're good, Asia. I think maybe you need to work through, but we can hear you. So you can go ahead and move forward.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you. I am really honored to be on this panel. I was invited by a close friend of mine, Chloe Sosa Jarrett over at Collective. So thank you for the invitation. I wanted to take the opportunity around talking about trust to do both a breathwork exercise and then a song that I think is related to the topic. So I'll be doing the song In My Room by the Beach Boys. But before I do that, I wanted to take an opportunity to kind of ground everybody in a practice that I think fosters self-trust. For me, when thinking about the topic of trust in the workplace, the thing that I wanted to offer first is the idea of self-trust. And I think that comes with, you know, feeling your body and feeling your breath. And, you know, that's how I have formed my own self-trust. And it's really been a helpful tool to advocate for myself within different workspaces. And I think that it's kind of like the grounding foundation, because everything always starts with yourself. So if you are willing and able, I'm going to lead you through a quick breath exercise that I call the square breath. Okay. So all you need is yourself, your body. So however you're sitting, feet, that's fine. And I'm just going to drop in for a second. So I'll give you a few moments to get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes whenever you're ready. Feel your connection wherever your body is making point of contact with wherever you're sitting. Loving reminder to relax your jaw. Relax your shoulders, middle of your eyebrows. And whenever you're ready, take a deep breath in through your nose. We're gonna send all that air to your stomach. So if you can feel your stomach expanding. Ready, inhale in. And on this exhale, you're gonna exhale out through your mouth. Let's try that again. Inhale through your nose, big belly breath. Exhale. Good. So now I'm going to start with the square breath that I talked about before. We're going to breathe in for a count of 4. Then we're going to hold for a count of 4. Then we're going to exhale for a count of 4 and hold again. Okay. So whenever you're ready, we're going to go in, 2, 3, 4, hold, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold. Again, inhale, in, 2, 3, 4, hold. Exhale, exhale through your mouth. Good, good, good. Hold. Inhale in and hold. Exhale out and hold. Last time in, hold, exhale, hold. Good. I'm gonna get started on the song now. Now, the great part about this song is that it's in this tempo. So if you'd like to continue your square breath while I am singing, please feel free. That is the whole idea, to ground ourselves wherever we are in this space together so we can talk about a really beautiful topic like trust. All right, here we go. There's a world where I can go to share my secrets too. In my room, in my room, in my room, in my room. In this world, I lock out all my worries and my fears. In my room, in my room, in my room, in my room. Do my dreaming and my scheming lie awake and pray. Oh, do my crying and my sighing laugh at yesterday. Now it's dark and I'm alone, but I won't be afraid. In my room, in my room, in my room, in my. Oh, do my dreaming and my scheming lie awake and pray. Oh, do my crying and my sighing laugh at yesterday. Now it's dark and I'm alone, but I won't be afraid. In my room, in my room, in my room, in my room, in my Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. I loved being here, and I'm excited for the conversation that's going to be had. Oh, thanks, guys.
Amazing. Wow, Desiree, that was absolutely beautiful. And thank you so much for your kind words and the meditation and also your beautiful voice. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, excellent. Well, everyone, hi, I am Latoya Lynn. I am your moderator representing ThinkHuman. Thank you for being here with us and listening in on this amazing topic. I would like to invite the panelists to join and come on screen, and let's get the conversation started and talk about this really amazing topic when it comes to, creating connectivity and trust in a workplace, and like what strategies can we implement to get that done. So before I go ahead and start, I would like to introduce our fabulous panelists. I would like to first start with Nelly Vasquez. She representing 15-5. She's a performance coach and, from the Bronx. Is that what we're saying? Brooklyn, Bronx, New York, a native New Yorker.
My mom's from the Bronx. She worked really hard to raise us in Westchester, but I still got love for the Bronx myself.
That's right. Right. We got to keep the roots there. And then we have Richard Leong. He is a senior DIA strategist, collective, and he is just a person of many, many, many lives. So hello, Richard. Welcome to the conversation. And you are calling in from the West Coast.
Yes, from the lands of the Ajashaman people, colloquially known today as Orange County, Southern California. Hey, everyone.
Hello. All right, that's what we're giving today. And then Tiana, you are a senior people operations specialist at DREDA, and you are calling in from
Dallas, Texas.
Texas in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So in this conversation, I had the opportunity to really talk to each of these panelists, and we've been kind of connecting together to really talk through things. But let's start with like the $1 million question. How do we even build trust? So let me take turns kind of like popcorning that question around. And Richard, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. Well, I'll start by actually tossing it somewhat back to the audience. I really loved seeing the responses in the chat flow in earlier when they were asked, what comes to mind when they think about connection and trust. There's a lot of things right in the chat flow that I saw were all big things that I wanted to hit upon today. I saw things around consistency, reliability. People are like, connection is trust, all of that. I love that. Definitely one of the big things that super resonates with me, and something that I hope everyone thinks about too, is the concept of psychological safety. So psychological safety, just to like define that, if folks, if that's a new word for folks, it's the level of trust required for somebody within an organization to be able to raise their hand and say, hey, maybe I've never done this before, but I'm going to volunteer and try something new. Or, hey, I'm going to, maybe in this whole meeting, everyone is thinking we go one way and I'm thinking we actually need to go another ways. And I'm going to raise a dissenting opinion. Psychological safety is the ability for an employee to be able to raise their hand and do that without fear of negative repercussions, right? And it's one of the first things that I think about when I start working with new organizations as a DEI consultant. I'm immediately thinking about who feels psychological safety within this org, who has the ability to feel it, and who maybe doesn't, and maybe definitely needs it more than others because of the marginalized identities, the historically excluded identities that they may represent, all of this stuff, right? So those are some of the initial things that come to mind. Want to hear from others too, though.
Yeah, I completely agree with Richard. And I think for a majority of us, the first word that comes to mind is safety, right? Is what I find important safe with the person that I'm interacting with in a given situation, or any situation for that matter? Do they have my well-being in mind? When there's trust, I feel safe knowing that, leadership is making the best decision for not only the business, but the people. When I have trust in my team, they value what I have to say and what I'm bringing to the table. And I think that dribbles right down to being a manager, right? Are you creating a safe enough space for your team to not just communicate the good, but the bad, the failures, the stress, the frustrations? I know I spend, 40 plus hours a week with the people I work with. So trust and connection with the people that I work with have way too much of an effect on my work, but also my mental health, to not be intentional about building this trust and maintaining it.
Absolutely. You threw out a good word there, connection. I was actually doing a client presentation the other day on building strong manager and employee relationships in the remote workplace specifically. And one manager there said, it's not even a question of trust because I know him. And I thought, ooh, I'm writing that down for this webinar. It's not even a question of trust because I know him. So Latoya, you started with this question, how do we build trust? For me, that's the same question. How do we build connection? I think building connection is the first step to building trust. Trust is the foundation of relationships. So how do we build trust? Building that connection. What does it look like to build connection? Expressing interest in someone. I've heard a great quote recently where someone said, people don't want your time, they want your presence. So it's not just creating the connection time, buying the pizza, physically being there. No, it's about asking questions that you're genuinely curious to know the answer to, and then following that up with a second layer question to demonstrate I actually care. And once we care about someone as an individual, I think that'll translate into how we show up into community.
I love everything that the three of you have said in regards to, Richard, when you just brought in a concept like psychological safety, that immediately comes into mind, right? And then Tiana, you kind of brought it a little bit to like the mental health and kind of teasing up what Richard is sharing. And Nellie, it's like, I love the foundation around presence, right? It's like the action of building the trust. That actually segues perfectly into my next question. I really want us to talk about okay, now here are all the things, right? And things that we can experience when it comes to building trust. Let's really lean into, what does it look like to actually build a thing, right? How do you build trust? Like, what are some good takeaways that we can all think about when it comes to building that? And I'm gonna just pepper in another thing on top. How have yourself personally, in your own personal journey, professional journey, have brought yourself through this process? What worked? What didn't work? And what could people think differently? And Tiana, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going to start with the second half of your question, because something just popped into my mind, and I'm going to be a little vulnerable here and say that I actually think trust has a lot to do with self-awareness as well. And this is the vulnerable part, is I'm a yes person. I'm a people pleaser. I will say yes because I want to look reliable. And so more often than not, my plate is overflowing. And so I may have, let's say 5 projects due in 1 week because I said yes to said projects. And I may be burnt out or tired, emotional, maybe taking that out on my significant other once I log off. And I think that sometimes that can lead into resentment for my organization or for my team. But really, it was me. It was me that said yes to all those things. Could I have said no? Could I have compromised and said, you know what? I can't do this by the end of the day, but I can do it by the end of the week. Would that be okay? Or maybe it's, you know what? I can't get that done, but I know someone else who has access to the same reporting. Can we go ahead and ask them? And to me, that's all self-awareness. That's me knowing that I'm a yes person, and I need to create better boundaries for myself so that there's no trust lost. Because if I don't get these things done by the deadline, then I'm letting people down. I'm misplacing that trust. So all of that to say, I think it's about being honest with yourself as well, and not just putting all of that on your management or your leadership. It's a two-way street. You have to look at yourself as well.
I love that. I love that.
If I could hop in here too, I love that story, and thank you for opening up and modeling that vulnerability for all of us, Tiana. It brings to mind another story for me too that I think dovetails with what you're saying about this piece around self-awareness. I'll say that, one of the best pieces of career advice I ever got was in my first job out of college. I was working through a nonprofit program called Teach for America. So I was a fifth grade teacher in a community that I did not have any connection to. It was really, really difficult for all sorts of reasons. And a mentor pulled me aside and let me know, hey, one of the things that you're doing, Richard, you're comparing your behind the scenes reel to everyone else's highlights reel, which was this piece of advice. Which also landed really well being from LA and thinking about Hollywood and all this stuff. But yeah, right. I was totally in the space of comparing what my struggle bus of an experience was looking as a teacher, right? And very much comparing my behind the scenes reel, because I was comparing all the moments where I was not doing well, where I was staying up super late, skipping meals, doing all this stuff, trying to connect with my kids. It wasn't working. And I was comparing that to all these highlights, right, that I was seeing of my peers doing really well. And so where I'm going with this is this piece around self-awareness. I think that, we talk about trust and connection, being one-on-one, right? As Nelly was mentioning, I think that implies that it requires the possibility for openness, right? And it requires the capacity for openness. And quite frankly, that's just not 100% possible for all folks all the times, right? The other thing that I'll also say, and this is not a knock on, it's going to sound like it is, but bear with me. I started in public education. I worked for a long time in the nonprofit space, and then now I'm in consulting with all kinds of organizations. And I have seen that in many organizations where it is part of the mission to sort of make the world a better place, if that's explicitly part of that organization's mission, that there are ways in which those boundaries that you've mentioned, Tiana, right? There are ways in which those boundaries are almost they're not encouraged to be maintained, right? Because that is how you're able to squeeze out more work and more productivity, right? And so I'll close just by saying this, right? I think the capacity for building trust and connection through this piece around self-awareness, it is something that all of us own individually, right? There's a capacity that we all have around that. And it is also shaped and a factor relative to the overarching systems and culture that we're working within.
Absolutely. There's been a lot great said here. I want to mirror remnants of what you all have said, but something I've been seeing a lot in the chat, and some of us with caps, I appreciate you letting us know you feel adamantly about this. A lot of people have been talking about transparency and agreements. And something we talk a lot about at 15.5 is transitioning between expectations to setting agreements. Not just I hold you to this thing in my head that I expect you to know, but actually, I'm going to say to you, I need this to be accomplished by this time, by this date, with this meaning. How do we feel about that? We have trust in our leaders when they maintain their agreements. The more agreements we maintain, the more trust we're building over time. And then someone might break an agreement, and that breaks trust. And you're not able to get back there. I know a lot of folks are experiencing that in organizations that are having reductions in force right now. How do we rebuild trust? And I know that's something that I've gone through personally. And I'll give an exaggerated example of that modeling Tiana's vulnerability. I really appreciate that. And I'm sharing this for a couple of reasons. One, because I know there are other folks on the line who have also gone through this. And secondly, because again, it's an exaggerated example of how we can rebuild trust. So when I was 15 years old, my father relapsed on a substance abuse that I didn't know that he had. And my dad, let me be very clear, is one of my best friends to this day. How did we get to that place after being in such a hard space? Because of the maintenance of agreements over time, because he showed up, because of the presence. So taking the time to make those agreements explicit, to maintain those agreements over time, and to maintain connection as we work towards those agreements together, to maintain humanity, that's another tangible outcome I'll give here. There's a colleague, former colleague of mine on the line who's like a work husband back in the day. We used to travel all over the world together. he taught me really well to assume good intent. And now you know a little bit about my life story, why I wouldn't assume good intent. And ooh, that is such a heavy burden to carry, to not assume good intent. But a way that you can build trust is by affording other people a blank slate. Don't think that they're trying to make your life difficult. Don't think that they're late because they're being lazy. Perhaps they have something going on. So assuming good intent and expressing curiosity, taking the time to build connection, and building and maintaining agreements. I think these are 3 very tangible and impactful ways to build trust.
I mean, I am completely blown away, Nellie, by you sharing that personal story and just expressing that layer of vulnerability, especially to our, our precious loved ones, that, are not perfect, but perfect at the same time. Because they really teach us what it means to build connectivity. And I think this really stems from, when we think about our professional career, right? And we think about, showing up at work, a lot of our personal experiences really allows us to be who we are at work. And I don't want us to disconnect the two. They're all in the same, we're the same person that shows up to work. It also shows up at home, right? And so really carrying that level of vulnerability and bringing it to that is super important. I do want us to really tease out opportunities for folks that okay, you're a manager, you're a leader, you're a CEO, you have all these life experiences, right? Because what happens is, for me, I'm from New York City, right? And I'm very professional. I've been all over the world. But the moment I hear pop, 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 I'm immediately going like this. And it could be anywhere. I could be in the south of France. The immediate reaction is run for cover, right? And that is an exact direct example of how I'm wired individually and wherever I show up. So such an exaggerated example that it's real. So when you think about a manager or a leader or a CEO or HR professional, whomever, how do we really bring that and then create, that level of trust within an organization? And anyone can take that first one, take this question.
I'm happy to start. I feel very grateful. I'm very lucky. I have an amazing, fierce manager. I don't know if she's on this call, but she is a powerhouse, and I know how lucky I am to have a manager like that. But one of the key factors that I need in a manager is someone who is going to not just support her team or the individuals on the team, but to protect them, to back them up. And fairly recently, I was demoing with a pretty big platform, and it was her and I and some reps from the company, and they asked, who's the project lead and who's the decision maker? I said, I'm the project lead, and my manager, she's the key decision maker. And they said, who else? Who else? VPs, SVPs, C-levels, anyone? And my manager immediately spoke up and she said, no, you're looking at the party. Tiana's the project lead, and I will be making the decision partnered with her. It's us. And it's tough because I almost wanted to defend myself, why am I being questioned? What did I say or what did I do? Is it my title? Is it because I look young? Is it my gender? I couldn't help but think that. But it built an extra layer of trust with my manager because she had no problem speaking up and saying, no, you're looking at her. She's the lead and she will be helping me with the decision. That was huge. Such a small moment, but it made such a big impact. Protecting your team, standing up for your team. It's huge.
That's amazing. I love that story. And it's really great tools to really think about when you have such great trust with your partners and with your leaders, how a difficult situation like this, you can be supported. Yeah. Richard, I remember hearing this amazing story during our call, and however version you want to share with the group in regards to your journey, kind of supporting, people of Asian descent or identifying this Asian descent. And to me, as a woman of color, I immediately identified. It's such a transferable experience. So however you want to share,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
I'm happy to share the story. Yeah, if I can set it up just with a little bit of context for folks, though. So I grew up in a small suburb in Orange County, California, and not Florida, California. And I was super lucky, to be able to grow up surrounded by people who look like me. It was a suburb just full of Asian immigrants, and so I never really felt alone being Asian, right? But I was bullied a lot, basically from the moment we immigrated in third grade all to the point of graduating high school. And I was bullied by other Asian students, just like sort of like different racial things, tensions, things between various ethnicities and all of that. And so suffice to say that, like, I've grown up with, I think, one, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder there, but two, also really seeking and being really intentional about wanting to build sort of like solidarity within the Asian American community in all sorts of ways, right? In college, well, they got rid of the Asian American Studies major when I was in college. That's a whole other story. But I was like part of the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month thing, like all this stuff, right? Long story short, graduated, Teach for America placed me in a community where I actually was incredibly lucky to teach Hmong students, HMONG, Hmong students. And I was fresh out of college. I was really struggling with the vocabulary and the comfortability of even like talking about race, ethnicity, right? I'd grown up being taught that you don't talk about that. We live in a colorblind country, all this stuff. And I was fumbling like to my manager, trying to explain to her how, a white woman, mind you, how meaningful it was for me to be teaching API students. And I was so scared of like over-representing how much this meant to me. And I was so nervous of making it sound like I didn't care about my other students who didn't identify as Asian, right? Like I was so terrified of that. But I needed her to understand that, this was really meaningful to me for a number of reasons. And just like broadly, random fact, less than 2% of America's public school teachers are Asian. So there's a huge gap there. Whole point. Anyway, after like letting me fumble over my words for like a solid, maybe like minute, that probably felt like eternity. My manager turned and was like, hey, Richard, just because I'll never experience that doesn't mean that it's not any less real for you. And I had never felt more validated in my entire life. Like ever, right? Like, I think a number of things here. Like number one, she had the own awareness and understanding of not only her identity, but sort of like broader issues around race and dynamics and all of that, to be able to have the comfortability to step in and provide me some language that I didn't have. But also she understood the boundaries of that, right? She recognized and made clear that hey, just because this is an experience that I, as a white woman, would never experience, right? In the same ways that you are feeling, that doesn't make it any less real. Right. And so I think it's this really complex, if you think slow down and think about it, it's a really complex, nuanced balance between sort of staying in your own shoes and understanding what that means, but also stepping into the shoes of the person that you're managing, of your junior employee who is looking to you for some guidance, for some support, for some validation. It's this complicated dance in between those two positions, right? That I think the most sort of supportive, thoughtful, intentional, whatever you want to call it, conscious maybe people leaders and managers have, that makes all the difference for building connection and trust.
Yeah, and what's so powerful about that is the concept of you taking poison into medicine. Who would have known those moments where you were struggling, being bullied, then kind of making it like your life's mission to transform, to build community, that trust, that safety, that honesty, throughout your diversity inclusion work. And then to have this experience where you don't necessarily have to be of the same ethnic background, but you can really just try to understand and connect and build validation based on what you know from a humanistic standpoint, to then acknowledge people that wouldn't normally feel connected and feel heard and validated in those situations. A couple of questions came through around race and diversity and trust. And that is a thing, right? To build trust, you build trust based on, how familiar you are with people, right? And when you're unfamiliar with people, then trust kind of, fades. It's a concept of being familiar, friends, family, all kind of derived from that word. Nellie, I want to kind of pitch a question to you when it comes to some of the work that you do at 15Five as a performance coach. And in the context of trust and building connection, what are some good takeaways that we can think about? For example, I'm a new manager and I want to feel connected to my team holistically. What are some actions and steps that I can take to kind of build that?
Absolutely. Great question. Before going into tangible steps, I would say the first thing is conceptually to understand command and control leadership is dead. That bag is in the laundry, right? And it's not getting washed.
No one's washing it. No one's washing it. It's getting washed and it's going to Goodwill.
It's done. It's done. And I say that specifically because you mentioned new leaders. And I think for newer leaders, especially folks who haven't received any training on leadership or what it's like to be a manager, and if there is not much of an age difference between those and the people that they're leading, then people feel, oh, I need to command and show that I need to be respected rather than earning that over time. So I think part of the conversation of what they can do, first of all, understand command and control is dead. So then what does that mean? Then that means I need to be a human-centered leader. And that's entirely our mission. And what we coach on is helping people to understand what it means to be a human-centered leader. Because when we were having conversations as panelists leading into this conversation, we talked about how folks need to show up with vulnerability. And I left that conversation and I thought, we made a big assumption there that people know what it means to show up vulnerably.
Mm.
That is not something that folks have often been taught. So what can a new leader do to build trust and relationships on their team? I think the first thing I will go back to is that connection time, especially in this virtual environment. If you're in a hybrid or remote work environment, we need to be extra intentional about how we're building relationships on our teams. As we've already shared, my background is from the Bronx, so I don't know about the rest of y'all, but my inclination to trust people I've never met in the real life before, it is not very high. It is not very high. So being intentional about those trust building exercises. I think that's one piece. Another thing I think is that's more tangible that people can walk away with here from is assigning meaning to our work.
Mm.
Framing our work with what is going to help us accomplish the mission or the impact that it can help us have in the world, especially in a remote or hybrid work environment. We are sending out tasks. This needs to get done. That needs to get done. So people feel like an employee. And of course, if you feel like an employee, I can check in, do my job, and check out in good conscience. But if we're framing and giving work meaning, then we're building community around that work. Now they perceive themselves as a community working towards a common end, and you foster teamwork in that. So I think building connection and framing the work that you're doing, that goes back to the transparency piece that a lot of people have been in the chat about, because there are so many changes happening that folks can't even associate it to the meaning. Give what clarity you can, frame it in that, give people respect, and you'll start to see your team embrace that autonomy, embrace that mission, and move towards some really great work.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Nellie, do you feel like it's, because I think this is correct, but I'd love to hear it from you. Do you think that it's appropriate to ask, how do you like to work? How can I be better? What are those questions that we should be asking from a manager perspective, but also from a team member perspective to expand on that connection, to grow that connection and trust?
Thank you for that question. I got overexcited and then I need to temper myself because my manager is on the line, adore her. And also I was like, I'm about to give out so much IP right now if I go down the line because this is a feature. This is a feature on our platform intentionally for that reason, because we know different people are equipped differently to have that conversation of getting to know someone. But I would say broadly, getting to know their energizers and de-energizers, right? What motivates them, what demotivates them, getting to know what they enjoy doing so that you can follow up on that. Most people who know me know I love neuroscience and my baby brother, and you can ask me about either of those things and you have my heart, right? And so just having a small amount of that information. And then finally, being really clear on what your people's goals are. Because when we're not clear about what their goals, their career, or their aspirations are, we're having really task-based conversations during our one-on-ones. That's all we're keeping it to. I'm loving that nod in my heart, Richard. That's all we're keeping. But if we know what they aspire to, then we can check in on that as well. Hey, how's it going with this? I think we have some professional development available for that. I know someone in my network. Would you want to connect with them? So those are some of the tools that I would put in there. And I invite any other insights that you or Richard feel like I'm missing.
Yeah, I would just, I'm a huge one-on-one person, and I see people talking about it in the chats. I think that effective one-on-ones, I've said this before, this is where the magic happens. And before we can even get to effective one-on-ones, I hope that if you are a people leader, you are having one-on-ones. That is the first step. Set up those one-on-ones weekly and stay consistent. If you start rescheduling or canceling, or you as a people leader are talking the entire time in a one-on-one, you are going to start misplacing that trust. I'm huge on one-on-ones. I think they're so beneficial. And I guarantee you, if you are not doing one-on-ones, there's probably a little bit of misplaced trust between you and your team. And that's one way to restore that trust. Richard, I'd love to hear from you.
I mean, I love what y'all are saying. The only other angle I'd give to go back to the original question, right? Like, what can folks be doing? I would definitely encourage folks who are in, more senior leadership positions where they perhaps oversee or have some level of input and involvement in like people management processes, right? To take a step back and look at those processes and think, what kinds of behavior are because what gets measured is what matters, right? And so it's like, what kinds of behavior are we encouraging based on what we are asking people to measure? I've seen many organizations where we've got great people, like really great people who understand, everything that we're talking about, but they are literally disincentivized to spend their one-on-one time asking about how someone is doing, how someone's baby brother is doing, right? They're literally disincentivized to do that because one, there's a ton of work to do, which there always is. But more so, like anything around that just doesn't get rolled in as part of how they're evaluated as a manager. There's nothing they can do with that information per se, right? And so, a lot of DEI work looks very flashy. It's like you're standing in front of rooms and workshops. Low key, y'all, like 80% of my day is just me like poring over spreadsheets, tinkering with them and being like, so what kind of behavior does this encourage? That's literally like all I think about, right? And so I'd encourage people who have power over management systems, the templates for those one-on-ones that you're talking about, Tiana, right? Write those things, set those things up in a way that facilitates the type of behavior that encourages people to spend that time doing the behavior that y'all are describing.
Richard, when you mentioned what's being measured, my data nerd came out to surface. I'm going to silence that side because that's just one side of me. And it's very true. What we measure, we care about. So that's very true. But that also brought this other side of me, again, on the human side, culture. Thinking about the culture that we're building. And as a manager, you really have a privilege to decide what culture you want to build in your team. But an organization is a makeup of its peoples and teams. And for example, when I first got to 15.5, one of the things that I noticed about the culture is everyone assumes a mindset of how can I make the next person's job easier? I looked up this is here, this is there. And so now every time I send a message, if someone is reaching out for support, I know that I'm trying to make it that way because that is the cultural implications I received and what we put out there. That's the positive side of culture. Imagine how detrimental the negative side of culture can be. So focusing on culture, intentional culture building is something I'd bring up there. Thanks so much for that flag, Richard.
I love that point though, around like, how can I make the next person's job easier? I love that.
Well, first of all, what I'm loving is this vibe right now. And what I also am loving is this opportunity for us to really kind of like generate insights amongst ourselves. And I see the chat kind of like peppering out. I do want to just answer a couple of questions live here, just because they're just really great questions. So, there was some work. There was a first question here. We talked a little bit about how diversity comes into place. We're gonna spend maybe a minute and talk about, how anti-Blackness impacts building trust and strategies. When it shows up for people that are not Black, and listen, and we can discuss, insert any other racial background into that concept. I think, Richard, I think you did a really good job kind of like talking through your experience. But if anyone wants to kind of share this concept here on like, how do you really balance that when race is something that comes through?
I can pop in again, or I'm happy to see.
Oh, yeah, go for it. I see you and Nelly kind of like.
I can go first, Nelly, and then you want to
Yes,
hop?
please. No, you
Yeah.
please.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is to really interrogate what professionalism looks like. So much of what people sort of imply as to be professional are really standards and cultures of practices that are grounded in anti-Blackness. And that, by the way, does not mean that that's the only thing that only white folks are prone to that, right? We're talking about cultures of practice and ideas and frameworks that can be spread, that can be implemented by anyone or adopted by anyone. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, is to really, really think about how are we defining professionalism? Because so many of the ways in which Black folks and other people of color, queer folks, other marginalized people are sort of dinged, for lack of a better word, within the professional workspace is by quote unquote failing to adhere to quote unquote professional standards. So that's one thing that I think a lot about. The other thing, it's not really another thing. It's more like a add on to that idea. Oftentimes in coaching conversations, one of the things that comes up for me when I'm working with managers, people leaders who are trying to not only broaden their own awareness, but be able to be better at bridging connections across difference, is to think about how do you make the implicit explicit. And that dovetails with professionalism, because so oftentimes people expect people to just know, oh, this is quote unquote professional behavior, professional dress, professional ways to wear your hair, whatever, right? And so much of that implicitness, right? When we aren't setting people up with, I guess, agreements, actually, to Nelly, your point earlier, right? When we aren't making those agreements public, that's when we're keeping them implicit, and that's setting up certain folks to fail.
Woo, go off, Richard. Yes, absolutely. And something embedded in what you were talking about there is cultural capital, right? And that's a very anti-Black thing, is that we're carrying cultural capital into what is the norm, which is generally white. And then we're having that be our baseline expectation in organizations. I started about 7.5 years ago in the work of executive coaching as an inclusion consultant, because of the problems that I had at a previous organization where I found myself advancing very quickly, but people didn't know the merit of my work. It was because I had the cultural capital of going to institutions in Greenwich, Connecticut, that people were like, oh, she looks different than me, but she talks like me. I like her. Intercultural competency, investing in intercultural competency in your organization. Something that infuriates me about the C-suite is that a lot of folks in the upper echelons of leadership, when blockchain broke, when AI broke, they were like, I need to be an expert in this in order to be taken seriously. But intercultural competency is perceived as a nice to have. I can outsource that to my CDO. It is all of our responsibilities to make sure that we're upskilling in our capacity to have intercultural competency. And if folks aren't having that experience, advocating for that in an organization. And I'll say this very loudly to any higher level leaders, because it's hard to advocate for that on the ground level. So if you don't feel comfortable advocating for that in your organization, at the very least, build that relationship with your managers where you can say, hey, can you be a voice on this? Because this is an experience that I'm having here.
I love this approach. And I think, something that resonates with me is the concept of how, when there are expectations that are, that don't look like what, other people might think it should be, it's rooted in, discrimination and biases coming to arise, and then subsequently dismantles trust and connectivity for folks that are, have the bright ideas, the real ideas, the hardworking, and kind of pushes through that. That's amazing. And I can relate to that. We have about 5 minutes left, man, and we can keep going. Another really great questions come through the chat. So we're going to try our best to kind of weave them in, something around companies going through tough times. And also, how do you rebuild trust when it's ruptured, and things like that. So I just want to start with Tiana. What are some really 3 takeaways that we can all think about in closing of this webinar? And Nelly and Richard follow through.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm going to go back to those one-on-ones. I think that's the perfect opportunity to be having these conversations. It's a perfect opportunity to build trust and build connection. Staying consistent with those one-on-ones of course we all have to reschedule from time to time, but staying consistent. I think remembering that sometimes you have to be the change, you have to set the foundation, you are the example. Sometimes you have to be the courageous one. But I promise you others will follow once you step up, just take that leap. And then third is, remember to make the environment, the relationship, the team safe enough so that your people feel comfortable enough to fail and learn. That's what this is all about.
Richard and I outplay each other right now. Richard, I'll let you close this off because I know it's going to be so profound and I'm going to be
No. Well, actually, what I was going to ask is, Latoya, could you repeat the question because I could use another processing moment.
Just 3 takeaways for our audience to walk away
3
from.
takeaways. Yep, for sure. So number 1, I think is again, like psychological safety, right? Making sure that folks have that feeling of the freedom to be able to raise their hand, try something new, maybe volunteer dissenting opinion without fear of repercussions. Number 2, I would say is that systems, right, shape our behavior. And so double check, take a look at all of the ways in which people are sort of programmed or encouraged to work with one another based on the ways that meetings are set up, the resources, the templates, the things that people are held accountable to is a big one for me. And then 3, I think really critically thinking about, especially for people managers and leaders, right? Thinking about how are we upskilling their own intercultural competency to Natalie's point, but also their ability, or I guess that dovetails with their ability to be able to bridge connections across difference, right? We work in increasingly diverse workplaces, which is a good thing because we've always been a diverse society, just folks weren't allowed to work, so that's a whole thing. But this is increasingly a much more important skill, and it's incredibly crucial.
Absolutely. I feel so fortunate. I get more time with both of you. And I just want to thank, before I close out, I would want to thank everyone for showing up for themselves and their development today. This is an important conversation. And if you're coming to it, it might be for reasons. And that means that you have a lot to do on the back end, but showing up for yourself today is huge. So thank you for being part of the conversation. I've been following the chat. It's really beautiful, the community sharing that's going on in there. The first thing that I will say as a tangible takeaway is build connection, real connection. Don't otherize your people. If you are an HR leader or if you are a manager, you're likely responsible for development in ways that you measure through statistics, so people can begin to feel like a statistic. Remember that you're working with humans and you should relate to them with your own humanity. So that is the first step, I think, in building connection. The second piece, I said it before, and I'll say it again, make agreements and keep them. And for those who are wondering, how do you rebuild trust? It is about setting new agreements on the other side. Don't set political agreements, right? Ones that we're saying for show, but that we won't keep. Make agreements that you will actually keep, because it's by the maintenance of those agreements over time that people will begin to rebuild trust. And then I really want to close the door with that assuming good intent piece. We all come with our own bag. I would have loved to nerd out on the neuroscience of how our brain is wired for survival today, but we were keeping it at home, and I love that, but our brain is wired for survival. So that means we have a lot of inferences that we make about our relationships with other people. And if you can challenge yourself to, as Desiree beautifully led us through, take a deep breath, wipe the slate clean, and assume good intent. Those are the 3 I'd like to leave you all with.
I love this conversation and this topic. And I can now comfortably say, I think I love all of you. This was so amazing and thoughtful and heart-provoking in the sense of why it's important. So with that being said, I just want to thank everyone, who was a part of this conversation. Thank you everyone behind the scenes on supporting and making this work. And thank you all to the viewers around the world who listen in and open up your heart to really hear this topic from these amazing people. Let's keep the conversation going. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you.